Welcome to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast, brought to you by FlowPath. I'm your host, Griffin Hamilton. This is the show where I interview industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights into modern-day facilities management. From hospitality to commercial real estate and everything in between, we'll learn what it really takes to succeed as a facilities manager. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have on Dr. Lou Fletcher. Dr. Lou, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to hop on and talk facilities management. And I know we're going to really deep dive into data and analytics surrounding K12. But before we do, why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and how you got into facilities management?
All right. Well, like I said, I'm Lou Fletcher. I spent over 20 years in the United States Air Force as a space and nuclear operations officer. So I was doing operations for the United States Air Force for a long time as a nuclear missile officer, as a space officer with satellites and satellite ground equipment and that kind of thing. And then when I got out, I went with Troy University as their regional director, which has a lot of elements of operations and it also education operations, specifically in higher education environment. And then I came to a place where I was traveling around the world too much with that, and I wanted to get back with family. So I decided to hunker down and work at a local school district, and I came in as their director of culture and services. And with that, I helped them with some DOJ issues and getting things straight from that perspective. And then I got the opportunity to become the executive director of facilities and operations. And that really, I fell back into that very easily because that's what I did most of my 20-year career in the United States Air Force.
When you're in the Air Force, was it called facilities management, or were you aware that you were doing facilities management? Because we've talked to a lot of people, and I've heard from a lot of people that were in military, and they just had no idea that it was facilities management, but what they were doing was facilities management. Was that similar for you?
Yeah, it's similar because like when you're the commander, you don't think about that you own a facility and you manage it. You think about you are a leader and you lead your troops. So yeah, when I was commander of the Detachment 2 of the 17th Test Squadron at Cheyenne Mountain, I didn't think about being a facility manager at all. I thought about being a leader of men and women in the United States Air Force. But along with that, I had my facilities. I had a lot of equipment. Some of mine was space, air, ground equipment. Test equipment and things like that. And then also, obviously, massive budgets in the Air Force and that kind of thing. Same thing when I was the dean of the Advanced Space Operations School. I didn't think of myself as a facility manager. I thought of myself as a leader of people in the educational environment and a dean. But within that, the same things. I had a facility. I had a large budget. I had instructors that had to go worldwide. I had had vehicles, and I had a fleet of equipment to be able to do that teaching. So when you think about it, there's a lot of things that are facilities management and operations that people don't normally traditionally think about that, but it prepares you for something like what I'm doing right now. I fall right into it. I'm used to having people who have things that they like. I have transportation right now. So I have over 100 buses for the school district. I have nutrition services. So I have people who feed all of the students in the district at least 2, if not 3 times a day. I have my facility maintainers who look at our preventive maintenance and our corrective maintenance and make sure the facilities run. Then also have capital where we are planning the future facilities for the district and building those and working with our zone superintendents and our principals to make sure that those facilities are built for the programs that need to go into them.
Yeah, and with that laundry list of responsibilities there, I'm sure that you're like many, especially in the public sector, where and a lot of people listening in the private sector as well are dealing with work shortages and the difficulties of finding, and not only finding, but retaining talent. So talk to me about that. Like what are your strategies going into that? How are you overcoming the work shortages that we're facing right now?
Yeah, that is a fantastic point to hit upon because coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people got different ideas about work and remote work. And unfortunately, for most of the things you're doing with facilities, remote work is just not going to be conducive. There's going to be certain jobs, like if we're talking about my contracts person or somebody who's doing some of the advanced planning, we can have some flexibility on that. But Until the technology catches up with it, I can't have the buses go out there remotely and pick up students and that kind of thing. And we don't have robots to make food and that kind of thing. So
hurry up, Elon.
Yeah, Elon, get things moving. But it's one of those things where people have a lot of opportunities, which is fantastic. And there was a lot of stimulus through the pandemic, which is also fantastic. But getting back to work, we want to employ, actual humans to be able to do work to support our students and that kind of thing. And what we want to do, and it's one of those things where it's not just localized to our school district. It's one of those things where it's I believe, a global phenomena. We're getting people back to work. So some of the things we're doing to get people back in places of, the normal marketing and things like that. We just had a huge career fair on Saturday, this past Saturday morning, where we had about 127 or so people sign up for it, and probably about maybe 300 people attended altogether throughout the day to be able to get them a chance to talk to our actual manager. So my transportation manager, Jack, was down there. So when somebody came up and wanted to talk about driving a bus, Jack, who's been doing this as an outstanding job, Jack Petrillo, he was able to talk to him about it, tell him what the benefits are of working for School District 49 and driving the buses and so forth. So you want to make sure that you personalize it and you let them know it's not just a job, it's a culture you're coming into. And our culture is different than some of the other cultures around us. We pay well. We can't pay the best. We're more of a rural to going into urban school district, and we don't have a big tax base out here that's commercial. But what we can say is that people tend to stay here longer because we have a really conducive work environment. We have great benefits package and that kind of thing. And those are the things that you kind of support when you're looking at work shortages. And also, and like I said, I'm certainly not a millennial basher because that's crazy. What I'm saying is that what you have to understand is that the nature of what people expect out of work is different. This is no longer that industrial age where your dad walked into a job and then 30 years later he walked out of the job with a pension. So people who are in their 30s into 40s are used to more job hopping right there, and getting those folks to understand that, hey, we have a great retirement plan, but you got to be here for 5 years to be able to get vested in that retirement plan. And what we find is that when we can get people to stay for 5 years, they usually stay much longer than that because they understand our retirement plan and that kind of thing. And it's really, really beneficial.
Yeah. And you also mentioned, the C word, right? So culture and how important that is. And so I guess with you having frontline managers going to marketing events like career fairs, so they could actually get a feel for who they could be working alongside. Because that is one thing to, here's a list of what our culture is, but to feel it and actually interact with it is another thing. What are you guys doing differently about your culture, or to really have that solid foundation of that culture to bring in that talent?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, one of the things I came here to do was the director of culture and services. So I have a good background in building culture. So that kind of works at what is facilities, what is leadership? Leadership is building a culture that keeps people. And some of the things that we do along those lines is looking at the pipelines and succession. We have a lot of people who came up through the ranks within our district who may have started out, for example, in our transportation area, who may have been a bus driver to start out with, or even a bus sub or a bus paraprofessional, who are now in our front office management now because they've come up through the ranks, and kind of extending that to build a culture. We're a school district, so we have students. So what we're doing now is putting together some internship and mentoring programs that allow students who may want to go into facilities to start doing some of that work on a scholarship basis or on a paid basis coming into their junior and senior year. So what would happen is this, and we're putting this together right now. We have some fantastic young people who are learning about engine mechanics. They're learning diesel, but they're also learning electric because, people can see what's coming. So what we want to do with our current staff is have maybe one or two of those folks shadow Randall, our head mechanic, in our bus operation. And then after they shadow him for a little bit and they decide they want to have a mentorship relationship and do an internship, they can formally become interns, and then they can go through and they can learn how we service the diesel engine on the bus and that kind of thing, and how we keep the buses up and running, looking at all the critical systems that are on the bus, the braking system, the wheels, the powertrain. And also that kind of gives a thing where it's kind of symbiotic, because if these young folks are coming through learning about the electric components as well, as we start transitioning to electric buses, they may be able to give some of that back. Obviously, we're going to train our mechanics about electric buses and that kind of thing as they start to come into the fleet. And then our hope is that some of those kids who come through and do the internship and that mentorship piece will stay with us, and they will become, the future of the district. And if they don't stay with us, we'll have trained some folks for other, districts around or other opportunities that are similar to that. So it's one of those things where we're looking at giving our students a pipeline, not asking them, hey, so how are you going to use what we gave you? Saying, hey, we have a way for you to use what we gave you, and continue on with the district. So that's one of the ways we're doing it, and also doing some more community outreach to make sure people understand that, this is a good place to be, and you're going to be able to be respected, and you're going to be able to have a great work environment, great coworkers.
Yeah. And that's great of you guys for being proactive there and, getting the next generation exposed into here's what's to come and here's what we're doing here and how you can take that skill set into, like you mentioned, neighboring districts if it doesn't work out internally, but it's just opening up a whole new world for that next generation, which has been a topic of this show many a times. But changing topics here, I know we were really leaning into data when we've talked here in the past. And that's something where you and I both nerd out on data and KPIs. So I don't even know where to begin. I'll throw it over to you. Where do you want to begin talking about data? Like, this is something I'm passionate about, so I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit and let you run with it.
Oh, yeah, data. I mean, looking at key performance indicators and using those parameters. I mean, that's something that goes back to, that probably accounts for the PhD and all that kind of stuff. But it's one of those things that goes back to when I was in the military. One of the things I was a commander of a test detachment, but I was in a test squadron for quite a bit of time. And what we used to do is we used to test space systems for the Air Force and actually the whole DoD. So looking at that, we had key performance parameters for satellites, ground systems, and things like that. And being able to test that actual performance gave us a good indication of how that would perform in a combat role or a surveillance role or something like that. So having that kind of background, testing those high level systems lets me look at everything from a systems approach. So when I talk about key performance indicators in a school district, I say, hey, what is going to make what we're doing in any of our areas more suitable and more effective to the mission we're trying to accomplish? It sounds very military at that point. So looking, for example, with, my facilities and maintenance, I'm looking at key performance parameter of total maintenance complete. And people say, well, that sounds pretty mundane. Well, we have preventive maintenance, where we have a timeline of getting it done with 30 days of due. And then we have like corrective maintenance, but that's when something just breaks and we have to fix it. We have a parameter of, it was working, so people need it within 7 days. So 7 days or 30 days would be your standards. So we take those and just make those a common variable of standard. So whether it was 7 or 30 depends on preventive versus corrective maintenance. So what you want to do with those is look at the total maintenance that you were able to complete within your specified standard. And if you were able to do 80%, you're probably meeting the standard. That's how I have it in my key performance indicators, is that if we're doing 80% of both of those within their specified time limits, then we're meeting the standards. Now, we don't just want to meet all the time. If we want to exceed the standards, we want to get to a place where we're looking at somewhere about 94, 95% of those all being done, which means if you flip it over, looking at those same parameters, that means we have a 5% failure rate. Now, it gets into the uniqueness of numbers, is that it sounds really good to say we're getting 95% of our stuff done. And if you're a very high performing organization and your process is very mature, 95% gets to be all hat. So what you may want to do is turn that into an efficiency standard and start looking at it from the perspective of, we have 5% failures. And you'd be surprised when you start saying, I have 5% failure in a high performing organization, how they start pushing that down. It may never get to zero, but sometimes overcoming failure is not just fixing something. For example, looking at a transportation operation where actually it's Six Sigma. It's a mature standard. It's like we have 5 nines of, looking at that 99.9999%. efficiency in that. So it's darn near perfect. And most times it is 100% of making sure we get students from their homes to school and from school back to home. And does that mean that our buses never break down or we never have access? It doesn't mean that, but we have like things like a ready bus. So we have somebody sitting here like back when I was in the Strategic Air Command, and we had ready fighters on there so that we could scramble fighters if something went wrong. We have a ready bus with a ready driver there that if an accident happens out there on a route, one of the things we do, in addition to saying if there's any injuries or anything like that, is dispatching a bus immediately to where that bus is broken down so that if there's any passengers, they can be picked up. We take those students to wherever they're going, home or school. And that way we still have that Six Sigma, high level rate of delivery of those students. And we are able to overcome the fact that there could have been a failure. If we didn't have that contingency, it would be a matter of saying, well, we never thought of that. Can we call somebody to get a driver in? Whereas we have a driver dispatched to a location where the bus has failed in probably less than 5 minutes, so that there's not students sitting there and there's not parents worrying about going to that scene to pick up their kids. We're making sure the mission is done, and then we take care of our buses and our driver. Unfortunately, most of the times when that happens, it's when no students are on the bus. So I'll knock on wood for that one right now to say, when no students are on the bus. But that is how you look at your key performance indicators to understand how you can be suitable and effective to your mission. Is understanding that at some point maybe we didn't have a ready bus, but we say how did we get down to 90? How did we get down to 80%? Well, we had to wait a half hour to send somebody up to go out to the bus. Well, is it more cost effective and more efficient to our mission to have somebody standing by, even if it's a front office person, to say, here, if something happens today, here's your bus, jump on it, go out there and get those kids, or go out there and finish that route. Then that's how you take a key performance indicator. So how do I get it from 80% to 90%? You start looking at, and that's what the key thing about it is, you start being able to drill down and say, well, your 5 whys. Why didn't we meet this? What was the reason? What could we have done? And you get down to, well, we could have a ready bus ready to go. You can say the same thing for lunches, the same thing for, rooftop units. I was going to say RTU, but a lot of people don't know what that is. But rooftop units, if you have a rooftop unit that's only got a service life of, let's say 15 years, and it's been up there for 16 years, you're going to have a failure. Even if you're doing your corrective maintenance on it, there's just, the lifespan of that thing. So if you understand those things using your top level key performance indicators, you drill down and find the whys, and then you fix the whys, and then you get back up to a place where you're operating very efficiently.
Yeah, and a few things that grab my attention. One, just being proactive and having that contingency plan. I mean, that is just so important. You can't gloss over that, where you do have to think worst case scenario and hope that it doesn't happen, but at least be prepared for it. The second thing that really grabbed my attention was you alluding to the mission, and that being something that I think can get lost in the day-to-day grind of facilities management, where you have to have that core why. And if it's not clearly highlighted and known throughout not only leadership, but the entire organization, then it's going to be that much more difficult to have that culture like you've talked about and to continue to constantly make improvements there. So talk to me more about your mission statement and what you guys are doing to keep that front of mind.
Well, one of the things that's fantastic about this district that I'm in is that we use the Malcolm Baldrige criteria when we're looking at education. And I'm actually a Baldrige National Examiner through that process, where we've invested in that. So I've gone out and had the training. I've actually evaluated other school districts, looking at their educational operations and things like that. And what it gets down to is that you'd be surprised how many people say we got to keep the mission going, but they don't know what their mission is. So you got to have a clearly stated mission, vision, and values. So what is our mission? Our mission here is to be the best choice, to learn, work, and lead. So and what is our vision? Our vision is to be able to launch every student into success. So, what are our values? Our values come down to the things that we must do to support the mission. So from an operational perspective, for my folks who are in a supporting role versus a supported role, and I'll talk about it in a second, the supporting role of operations and facilities is to make sure that there's world-class facilities and world-class supports and logistics to be able to make sure students get an education in a K12 environment. So with that, us understanding what our mission is, we start to fortify those things that allow us to have that supporting role. Now, the people who are supported in that are the teachers, administrators, and school folk who are in there delivering education in the classroom. But the relationship is a symbiotic one as well, is that if they can't get to the building because there's ice and snow or weeds doing things like that, if their building they're setting in is not comfortable because the HVAC is broken or it's not clean because my custodial folks can't get out there and do their job, then those factors right there detract from those students being able to be successful in their educational endeavors. So it's one of those things where when you talk about mission focus, first, you must know what the mission is. If you're using something like Baldrige as your guide, you start looking at performance of the best companies, best people in the industry in the world. So when you're going against those as benchmarks, you're not just isolated with a thing saying, I think we're doing okay. We can actually say, looking at our performance in District 49 versus other school districts and other educational institutions, we know where we fall. So we've won the highest regional award, the Peak Award, from the Rocky Mountain Performance Excellence group, which is one of the Baldrige organizations that's regional. So when people say, do you know how you're doing against other like industries, we know we're doing very well because we're able to be at the pinnacle of that. And we're pretty soon here probably going to go for the national level of that. So wow, that's a lot to say. But if you know, it's the iron sharpens iron. If you want to know if you're doing well, look at yourself versus the best, and then you'll know if you're doing well. And if you're only almost the best, you're still doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, no doubt. And on that, on the note of benchmarking, so that could also be something where it could be a daunting task to begin that, right? Because that's a rabbit hole that, I mean, who do you benchmark against? Is it a similar size within the industry, similar size school district, large school district, private schools that by the campus? And so if I'm a K-12 facilities manager, where do I begin?
I think one of the things you want to do is you want to start to look at other schools and look at national standards. Like this, how I know that 7 days is the standard for corrective maintenance and 30 days is the standard for preventive maintenance is that we looked out there at national benchmarks. And how do we know that 80% is good versus 90%? We've looked at national benchmarks. And once you start to do that, you can see performance go up, because before that, you might have a casual, anecdotal kind of thing. I think we're doing pretty good. But when you really test it, you say we're doing like 65%. If you're doing 65% in terms of your efficiency and 80% is the standard, you're behind the benchmarks of others doing the same things you're doing in industry. And then also the beauty of starting to reach out and looking at national benchmarks is that you can start to get some other data on, well, what do they do to achieve their 80% or better? And once you start to look at the benchmarks and you start to look at what others are doing, then you can start to model. And then, like I said, some people don't like to test their own performance because they don't want to know if they're doing good or bad. They just want to say, well, I got the job done. Right. But, going back to my Air Force days, looking at things like launching test ICBMs out of California and having them land out in the Kwajalein Atoll, we want to know how accurate our nuclear weapons are. We want to know that they perform. We turn on our telemetry and that kind of thing because we can improve, because that's something that is very volatile and can be very dangerous. Now, when you think about that from the importance of launching our kids to success, we want to make sure that we're actually launching them to success. We don't want to have a whole bunch of kids come through for 12 years and feel happy because they get to walk across the stage for graduation and then find out they don't have the skills they need to be successful out there. So you hear me talk about from an education focus. And you said, well, we're talking about facilities and operations. But for us to understand what our key mission is those kids. And that kind of puts the importance to our mission to understand that we're involved in education. So that means we have to be, at a world-class standard for being able, for logistics of serving our lunches and being able to get students to and from school, because that nutrition and that delivery system is something that is going to help those students to be the best they can be. When we're talking about our facilities, they need to be world-class facilities because we want to have the most conducive environment for our students to be able to be successful. So a lot of people might think about things as a kind of a separate thing. Well, we just do our operations and we do the buildings, we do this and that. But is that our mission? Those buildings don't exist for us to maintain them. Those buildings don't exist for us to just build them and design them. Those buses don't exist for us to shine them up and make it look nice. All of that stuff is focused toward the main mission of the district, to be the best choice, to learn, work, and lead. So we want these people to say, District 49 is where I want my kids to go. We know that they're going to be successful and they're going to be launched to success. It's implicit in their facilities. It's implicit in their operations. And then I think we have the right focus. So understanding what others do and milestones are important to us. And they give us the framework to be able to move forward. But understanding what's key important to the success of the whole district also helps us be motivated to move forward and do the right things for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And well said. I do have one final question. It's a question I ask everybody. So that's who or what has had the biggest impact on you and your career?
Oh, that's wild. That's one of those big questions right there, because so many people have. I've benefited from so many people working with me, but so far as in my professional life, I would always take it back to high school myself right there. I remember one time when I was a junior ROTC cadet, Army junior ROTC cadet in Washington, D.C. And it was the first year of the program. So it's kind of like, okay, you're a captain, you're this, you're that. So I was lucky enough to do something like be a cadet officer my first year. And I had stuff with the drill team. And then a whole bunch of kids were getting like, oh, well, we got to have initiations and all this other kind of stuff because it's drill team, we're hardcore and that kind of thing. And some of that got out of hand. And it was one of those things where I caught it and I was like, okay, but I was in charge. And I was like, man, this is done. It's first year. I'm going to be out of this thing. And then the colonel came to me and I said, sir, I understand. And I should have known all this right there. Got it. I understand if you want to take the rank, and I'll be a cadet private or whatever. And the colonel looked at me and he said, no, I'm going to give you the harder job. The harder job is that you're going to fix this and you're going to get people in the right place and you're going to instill some discipline and you're going to be around to make sure this doesn't happen again. I said, well, that's kind of interesting. I'm used to, as a kid growing up in a poor area and stuff like that, I'm used to, like, you make a mistake, you get marginalized, you get kicked out,
Mm-hmm.
But he was like, no, you're going to do this. So, I said, well, he's giving me a chance. And it was Colonel Gregory, and I went out there and I did my stuff and we got everything straight. And then next year I was the vice commander of the Corps. It was my last year. It was my senior year and I was vice commander of the Corps. And I was like, it helped me to learn that, you can make mistakes. And if somebody will have trust in you and restore you, you can go on from a mistake to do good things. And now you're informed by the bad thing that you did. And, it was kind of transformative for me because I started to see that, we don't have to be perfect. We can make mistakes sometimes. And as long as we understand, we honestly came by that. And we understand what the expectations are, we can come back to it. And I think that's kind of what informs some of the work that I did with culture and services as bringing in restorative practices and that kind of thing. But that was somebody being restorative with me before I knew what restorative was. But it kind of shaped going into the military, going through university and everything like that, that when I came across a person who might have fell below standards, as long as it wasn't illegal or immoral, I didn't have to send him to jail or anything like that. I could come to him and say, hey, you fell down. We all fall down. And that's one thing people don't quite always communicate. We all fall down. Mm-hmm. But we got to get back up. And it's also when you're a leader at this level and you're motivating a team, of more than 300 people, they can't be expected to be perfect every day. But just like with our key performance indicators we talked about, you got to let them know where the bar is. If you don't let them know where the bar is, if you're one of those folks who kind of, we say sharpshoot back in the military, and they don't learn the rules until they mess up, and they don't know what the performance standards are until they mess up. They should mess up because they don't know what they're aiming for. Right. You want to make sure there's a clear and explicit up front. So I would say probably that colonel, but then many different people from, my dad, my mom, all that kind of stuff like that over my life. I'm a tapestry of people's care, I could say.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And a quick call out on the age, right? You mentioned high school and tying it all together with the impact that we're having on the next generation. And that very quickly came to mind as something that's so impactful that was during your high school years that, still to this day sticks with you. So love that. And again, Lou, certainly appreciate you coming on. This has been incredible. I'm going to put in the show notes a little bit more information if anyone wants to reach out to you. But again, be good. Thanks so much. And until next time, we'll talk soon.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Modern Facilities Management Podcast. Make sure to subscribe for future episodes and follow us on LinkedIn for more facilities management content.